For the second consecutive season, Penn State Wrestling is getting ready to rewrite the history books and go down as the best team ever.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State Wrestling. Thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko, and I am your host of the show. Some regular season takeaways, of course, how they relate to the postseason here, as this Penn State Wrestling team is trying to reset the records the team just set the program just set a season ago, but now they're trying to reset them, plus some other observations in addition to that, future lineups and things like that based on what has happened this season. But I want to begin with how this team can be, once again, the best team in NCAA wrestling history. Of course, if you got any thoughts you want to contribute, let me know them down below. But I start with this because there is a possibility that 8 wrestlers do make the finals. And a season ago, Penn State had 6, which is nothing to bat an eye at, but Penn State is once again trying to raise the bar. It is a realistic possibility because at 141, title contender with Bo Bartlett. 149, title contender with Shane Van Ness. I'll keep going. Tyler Kasak at 157. Mitchell Messenbrink at 165. Levi Haynes at 174. Carter Starachi at 184. Josh Barr at 197. And at heavyweight, Greg Kirkfleet. And Luke Lillidahl, I think, has the potential to go on a deep NCAA run, but it's going to be difficult because of his weight class. So this is how talented the team is. And I don't want to leave Braden Davis out of this either, because if he was fully healthy, there is a possibility that all 10 in this lineup could reach the semifinals. So when you look at it compared to last season, Penn State had 172.5 points. They were 100 points ahead of the second place finisher in Cornell. They had 6 finalists, 8 All-Americans, and that was with a team that Bernie Truax made the podium, but he wasn't truly a national title contender. Aaron Nagel got knocked out. Braden Davis at 125 got knocked out. But Braden Davis is better. And Luke Lillidahl at 125 this season is better than what Braden Davis was a season ago. So you kind of combine that all together and look at that. Penn State is getting ready to rewrite the history books. And I think it will be broken. Now, I'm not going to sit here and guarantee, okay, this is what's going to happen, but Penn State is in a better spot and has wrestlers that are at the top. They're either ranked number 1 or number 2 in the 10 starting spots in this entire lineup, because I know Shane Van Ness is number 2, and I know some of these weight classes are loaded with talent, but Penn State is better suited to actually score more points, maybe even have a larger margin of victory. I know Iowa's there, Oklahoma State is there, but last season, Cornell, Michigan, they were way far away from it, and Penn State's team is somehow even better in the 2024-25 season going into this 2025 postseason. So, but let's add to that. So Penn State is going to do well at the Big Ten tournament, the NCAA tournament, but this team, as dominant as it was in the regular season, the results speak for themselves. Penn State dominated every single team, including the number 2 Iowa Hawkeyes, 30-8. We just saw that great dual meet between Iowa and Oklahoma State. Penn State dominated that same Hawkeyes team and then obliterated a top 5 Nebraska team, a top 10 Ohio State team. And also along the way, they shut out the likes of an Arkansas Little Rock, a Michigan team, teams that were top 20, a Missouri team that, no, they didn't necessarily get the shutout, but it was a wide margin of 40-plus points. The argument that they wrestle a cupcake schedule or that it's easy, Penn State just makes it look easy. That's really what it comes down to. So this team is somehow raising the bar, is somehow on a whole nother level. They can certainly have 10 All-Americans. They can certainly have 8 reach the finals. And Luke Lilladall's kind of this X factor because it is difficult to project Braden Davis to have a deep postseason run because what he's dealing with in terms of his physical health. The leg injury never fully healed, and he hasn't been 100% the entirety of the season. So if over the course of these 2 weeks and he is able to do well in the Big Ten tournament, maybe that changes my opinion. But as we sit here before the Big Ten tournament, you have 8 that are actual national title contenders, and then Luke Lilladall, who could peak at the right time because of all the potential he has. So here, let's look at those championships. And I'm not trying to make predictions necessarily, but let's look ahead before the Big Ten tournament, before we know the seeding for all of these things, because that's certainly going to impact it. Because I do have a lot of confidence that Lilladall will peak in the NCAAs, kind of similar to Tyler Casack a season ago. But it depends, what is his route? Is he meeting a Matt Ramos in the quarterfinals instead of the semifinals? That's going to be a massive difference there. But that's something that could, if Lilladall is going to go on that run, he is going to have to defeat somebody like a Richie Figueroa or a Matt Ramos. Davis's injury, it has me cautious about a deep run. But remember this, he was defeating All-Americans when he's less than 100%. Nasir Bailey, he kept it close, and this was before the injury kind of kept him sidelined and everything. He was close against Ryan Crookham. Now, he didn't win, but he looked honestly like the best version of himself. I believe in moral victories, so Davis has proven a lot. I've seen that Davis improved compared to his freshman season, as he should, to his sophomore season, but he looks like a better wrestler. He's defeated Nick Bazakis. I know that Lucas Bird kind of gave him a little bit of a reality check there, but Dylan Shaver's in that win column too. Davis is beating other wrestlers in this weight class that are going to contend for spots on the podium when he is not 100%. So know that Braden Davis is good. He's just dealing with an injury. Bo Bartlett, national title contender, got his revenge against Jesse Mendez, but that is a 3-man race between Mendez, Andrew Alirez. Bo Bartlett, again, depending on seeding, could be in the championship, or he could have to go through a Mendez or an Alirez, whoever's the 2 and the 3 seed. Shane Van Ness can win it all. He's the second seed. He was the second overall ranked wrestler at the moment. Caleb Henson's there, but you should expect Shane Van Ness to get to the finals. You should expect Tyler Casack to get to the finals against maybe the likes of a Meyer Shapiro. Mitchell Messenbrink, I can almost all but guarantee that he's going to win at 165. Mikey Caliendo is really good. Mikey Caliendo has improved significantly for Iowa, but Mitchell Messenbrink still has a large gap between himself and Caliendo. Levi Haynes is somebody that should be expected to get to the national finals, but kind of in the same boat as a Bo Bartlett, where Keegan O'Toole, Dean Hamity, that is a 3-man race where any of them could be the final 2. But I think any of those 2 will be in the finals. Carter Starachi on a crash course once again to meet Parker Kakaisen outside of the NWCA All-Star Classic. I think Josh Barr reaches the final. I really do, against a Stephen Buchanan. And maybe he surprises. I fully expect them to wrestle in the Big Ten tournament. So we'll see if Barr learned anything from that matchup there. And then Greg Kirkfleet, Gable Steveson is there, but you should expect Kirkfleet to get back to the national championship. So we'll see how that unfolds. But there's a lot of serious national title contenders at 8 out of the 10 weight classes. So it is very much a possibility that they get 8 finalists. And then who knows what happens from there, who they meet and what have you. Some of them are ranked number 1. Some of them are ranked 2nd, but you can expect at least 8 to get to the championship. And like I said, if this lineup was in perfect standing, who knows? Maybe you do get 10 into the semifinals. It is that crazy to think. Now, Zach, if Penn State is so good, why don't they do what Iowa does and wrestle a top 5 team like an Oklahoma State to finish the season? I wish it were that simple. I'll explain why and some other regular season takeaways on the other side of this break. And today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. March basketball is almost here, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With PrizePicks, you simply pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's fast, it's easy, and it keeps every game exciting. Build your lineup. So on any given night, you can choose any players that are available. If you think that Jason Tatum, for example, is going to have more or less than his point projection, or Anthony Davis, if you think that he will have more or less on his rebound projection, you can build your lineups with your favorite players. It's quick and easy. You can make your picks in as little as 60 seconds and stay engaged all game long. Fast payouts. When you win, your money hits your account in as little as 15 minutes, so there's no waiting around. And then PrizePicks even offers weekly promos like a Taco Tuesday, where you can get discounted player projections for even more value. Download the app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONCollege and you'll get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That is code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That is PrizePicks. PrizePicks, run your game. So why doesn't Penn State wrestle a top-tier program to finish the season? Iowa did it. Oklahoma State did it. They wrestle American University, a program, a team that is nowhere near the caliber of any of the opponents on their schedule for the bulk of the season. Well, first I want to address the naysayers that make the argument that Penn State is just avoiding the competition. They don't want to be challenged. They wrestle in the Big Ten Conference. They wrestled that same Iowa team and won 30-8. They went out to Nebraska and dominated a top 5 Cornhuskers team. They dominated a top 10 Ohio State team despite not having the full starting lineup. Oh, and along the way, they also schedule a top 20 Lehigh team, a top 20 Arkansas Little Rock team, a top 20 Missouri team. So to say that Penn State's schedule is weak and they just don't want to be challenged to finish the season is wrong. This simply has to do with logistics. Iowa has Carver Hawkeye Arena, an arena devoted to wrestling, men's and women's basketball, and gymnastics. Oh, but Penn State has the Bryce Jordan Center. Yeah, but Penn State wrestling doesn't have immediate access to the Bryce Jordan Center. Or else, I think this would be the case. I think if Penn State had first dibs on the Bryce Jordan Center the same way that Iowa wrestling has Carver Hawkeye Arena, then yes, you could make this argument if Penn State was passing up an opportunity. So for an opponent like a Northern Iowa, first you need to get them to agree to it, that they want to wrestle Penn State to finish the season. And I imagine they would. It's nothing. This has nothing to do with Northern Iowa. It's about insert top tier program that would agree to wrestle Penn State to end the season as the last dual meet or Penn State's last home dual meet. If you're going to host an opponent that is high caliber, that is one of the best in the country, you want to put that dual meet in the Bryce Jordan Center. You want to have 15 to 20,000 people in attendance, not 2,000 to 3,000. So it's because Penn State wrestling is still first and foremost in Rec Hall, and then the Bryce Jordan Center is for those spectacular dual meets. And again, I want to phrase that very carefully because it's not to diminish the other duels, but they schedule Iowa in the Bryce Jordan Center for a reason, or they schedule an Ohio State or a Michigan as compared to a Maryland, for example. So if you're going to schedule a non-conference opponent that is top 5, top 10, that is unprecedented, you're going to want to put them into the Bryce Jordan Center as opposed to a Rec Hall. So this simply has to do with logistics. And Penn State is not afraid to schedule those teams, but it's all about timing. Penn State doesn't have an immediate access to the Bryce Jordan Center. There are a lot of other teams. There are other programs that utilize the Bryce Jordan Center. So Penn State has to be strategic with how they schedule events when it comes to wrestling. That is why if Penn State's ever going to schedule Oklahoma State, which I hope that they do, and I hope they put that one in Beaver Stadium, so we'll talk about that in just a second specifically, but it needs to be at the beginning of the season. It needs to be early. One of those non-conference opponents, kind of Wyoming ended up in the Bryce Jordan Center, but that's the idea, is that if you're going to schedule a non-conference opponent like a Northern Iowa or an Oklahoma State, which everybody is going to point to as they should, and that one should be in Beaver Stadium, you're going to have to do it earlier in the season. And let's talk about that Beaver Stadium duel, because that's another regular season takeaway here, is that Penn State needs to find a way to schedule OKSU in Beaver Stadium as soon as possible. But I don't think it's going to happen in fall of 2025. Maybe it happens as soon as fall of 2026, because I think Cael is going to give David Taylor time to build up the program to match and compete with Penn State so that it is a close dual meet, because it wouldn't be as interesting if it was a 30-8 margin. Now, it would be great for Penn State, but Oklahoma State, and I don't think Oklahoma State would back down from a challenge if they feel ready to do this. So again, it has to do with logistics. It has to do with planning. But a Beaver Stadium duel, I think, is going to happen within the next 3 years, and I think it's going to be, and it should be, Oklahoma State. Next season is a possibility, but I think the beginning of 2026 or 2027 just makes more sense because David Taylor settled in. It allows maybe the power dynamic to shift a little bit, and we don't go, because I can't just assume that every single team is going to reset historical records for Penn State in NCAA history. No, but David Taylor, you give him time, and I think he's going to start to cut into Penn State's dominance a little bit. But Oklahoma State and Beaver Stadium, that would have what? You would need the weather. You would need the weather to cooperate, and the only way to do that is late October, early November, and that's the best case scenario. You would hope that weather would cooperate enough where it's in the mid-50s, and that winter weather doesn't start a little earlier than anticipated there. So, because look what Iowa did it with Oklahoma State. They had it at Kinnick Stadium, and that was a great moment, and Penn State can do it themselves and reset that attendance record too. Now, as for a couple of other regular season takeaways here, I've been thinking about the future of the lineup. Josh Barr has really settled in at 197, and he started at 184. I don't think he's moving back down. I'm going to tell you how that affects Penn State's lineup for years to come on the other side of this break. Penn State's lineup gets interesting for the next few seasons because of what Josh Barr has been able to accomplish this season. I think Josh Barr stays at 197. I think he should stay at 197. That's my expectation. And what this does is it displaces Connor and by proxy Cole Mirasola because they are twin brothers. Now, Josh Barr came in with the expectation that he was going to wrestle at 184, but then had a competition, 197, and he's not only become the clear starter for Penn State, but 197, he's a national title contender. I understand it if he was a fringe All-American or just somebody that, maybe had some potential, but you counted him out early on. No, Josh Barr should be expected to potentially win an NCAA title this season. And this is his first season starting at a weight class that wasn't his. You don't just bump him back down to 184. Now you have reinforcements there. This is another part of the argument. If you didn't have an answer at 184, it would make sense. Have Josh Barr cut, and that's a large weight cut to go from 197 to 184. And maybe he is giving up a little bit of weight, but to go from 197 back down to 184, we've heard Carter Starachi talk about it, how it's been easier just to manage his weight, maintain his weight since moving up to 84. And Barr's admitted it too, that it's just a lot easier to manage 197 than it is 184. So Barr is going to stay at 97. If they didn't have an answer, then yes, maybe you can have the argument that he should make the cut, go back to 84, because then you have a national title contender, and oh look, you have Connor Mirasola waiting in the wings. But Zack Ryder's there at 184. And Connor, I don't think he could cut to 184. Maybe he could. Maybe that's a conversation to be had. But the point is, still above all else, it does displace the Mirasola twins. And why I say it displaces both of them is because they are twin brothers. Every part of their career has been together. They are at Penn State together. They wrestled in adjacent weight classes to one another on the international level. Connor at 92 kilograms and Cole at 97 kilograms. So for Connor Mirasola, he doesn't have a path into the starting lineup at the moment. If Josh Barr's at 97, Zack Ryder's at 84, and then if Connor couldn't make the cut to 84 to make that a competition between Ryder and himself, because I think Ryder's the answer at 184, and I'm going to give you my final takeaway in how Angelo Ferrari and Zack Ryder are setting up for an epic showdown for the next 4 years. But it just makes it a little bit difficult. Now, everybody's path is unique. Everybody is an individual to their own right, but they are the Mirasola twins. So if Cole's going to be the heavyweight starter and then Connor doesn't have a spot in the lineup, I just think it gets interesting. It's something that's just kind of been floating around in my head. What is the answer? So let's take that a step further. I believe that Cole Mirasola has potential to be not only an All-American, but be a national title contender once he finally settles in at heavyweight. He just needs to add the weight. And since he was wrestling at 97 kilos, and forgive my math, but that's around 210, 215 pounds. So he's been wrestling as a 215 pounder for quite some time. And then he's going up against opponents that are 40, 50 pounds heavier than him, also all Americans. But I noticed that he didn't get tech fault. He didn't even lose by major decision to those all-American caliber wrestlers. And he's giving up 40, 50 pounds of weight to Luke Luffman and Nick Feldman. So I think Cole Mirasola is on his way. But let's address the doubters that don't believe that the Mirasola twins, either of them, have a future at Penn State, or they have concerns about them and how good they'll actually be. Penn State, because of the transfer portal, could always go in and try to recruit a heavyweight, somebody that is short-term, that is maybe a graduate wrestler, somebody that has 2 more years of eligibility left, and someone that could be in it, because we don't know how the transfer portal is going to look. We don't know who's going to enter. We don't know who's going to be in the offseason looking for a new destination. And if Penn State's in the market for a heavyweight, and if they don't believe that Cole Mirasola is the option, then they can absolutely go and find somebody in the transfer portal. So I think it does get a little interesting. What seemed like such an obvious, such a given is not so much anymore. Now, you could also make the argument that, Zack Ryder cuts to 74, and then Barr goes to 84, and Connor Mirasola settles in at 97. That's a lot. I think that's a lot, because Levi Haynes is still at 74 for another season. So, and PJ Duke arrives. So it does get really interesting, to say the least, but it's just not as clear of a path for the Mirasola twins as it once seemed when they first committed. Now let's finish up with Zack Ryder. Zack Ryder versus Angelo Ferrari will be the best individual rivalry for the next 4 years. Both of them are going through their red shirt. I've seen the people that say that Angelo Ferrari should have wrestled this postseason, and that would be wrong. For Iowa would be making a terrible move if they decided to do that. However, Zack Ryder will have a full 4 years. Angelo Ferrari will have a full 4 years. You should expect both of them to be at 184. And because of the tension between Penn State and Iowa, because I know that, yes, Max McAnally exists, and I know that Rocco Welsh is returning to Ohio State. But in terms of rivalry, in terms of, I view this as the way that Bo Bartlett and Jesse Mendez go back and forth, and they just kind of trade punches. It's the same thing here, because it's Penn State versus Iowa. If Ohio State was wedged in there into this conversation as far as one of the top programs chasing after Penn State, then maybe it's a little bit different. But because Iowa thinks that it should be on the same level as Penn State and is trying to chase them, Zack Ryder versus Angelo Ferrari gets really interesting. But 184 overall is set up very nicely for the next 3 to 4 years. There is certainly it is not going to be devoid of elite talent and anybody that can win an NCAA title on any given day. Those 4 names will dominate the 184-pound weight class. But my argument is in terms of the individual rivalry, who everybody's the matchup's going to have circled, the bad blood, the toxicity. I think Zack Ryder versus Angelo Ferrari is going to be a really good one that's going to transcend a lot of the other individual matchups over the next 3 to 4 years. That'll do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Again, let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. Thank you so much for checking out this episode. If you are new to the show, please subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. Leave a like on this episode, share it with friends and family. And for more conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams, including Penn State wrestling, Penn State men's basketball, Penn State football, keep it right here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And thanks again for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. For your second listen and watch, you got to check out Locked On Big Ten with host Craig Sheeman. Craig puts the Big Ten first, covers all 18 teams in depth, including Penn State. And that's why it's called Locked On Big Ten. It's available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, and it is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day.